So, I'm actually going to explain why I punched Loretta. And I have this playing in the background because it's so true that I'm actually treading on water where I've never been before, so I need God to guide me. And in doing so, I also need to say I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get it all in this one take. It might have to be two. But however, I will tell the story. I have my liquids just in case I get dry mouth. Um, but I'm not going to start in prayer, but I want to start off with the scripture. And it says, it's Romans 15:1 that says, we then that are strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak and not to please ourselves. And in discussing what happened, I realized I can't explain Loretta. I can explain me. So I'm going to share with you guys why I did what I did, but I need you to understand me before I'm able to do that. And so I'm actually going to go back in the early 2000s. I would talk to my brother about, because my sister and I argued a lot. We argued a lot. And every time I would talk to my brother about when we would argue, he would say, well, that's your sister, you ought to forgive her. And also I have notes here too, so if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes. And my response was, just because she was born into the position next to me doesn't mean I automatically have to respect her. Respect works both ways. And then there were times when I would actually talk to my sister and give her little nuggets of wisdom. And as soon as she would walk away and come back and we talk again, everything I said to her was negative. And it was as if she couldn't understand why I, the younger sister, was giving her wisdom, and she was the older sister, and she should have been giving me wisdom. And even though we argued more after that, it wasn't until last week that I realized that the reason I was able to give her wisdom was because years ago, when I worked at Blue Cross of California, I had a friend that I would go walking with at lunchtime, and she would always give me the word, whether I wanted to hear it or not, always give me the word. She moved to Atlanta, and then we had a conversation, and she said, oh, I stopped paying my tithes. I need to go back. It's been 3 weeks since I paid my tithes. I need to go back. And I was like, what? I've never done that before. Because I was clubbing. I was in my mid to late 20s. I was clubbing Wednesdays, Saturday nights, Little J's, downtown LA. That's where I was. But I was tired of that, and I wanted something more. I always knew I was coming back to the church. I just didn't know when or how, but I knew I wanted something more when I came back to the church. And so when she made that statement to me of me paying my tithes, I was like, okay, let me try that. And so I worked a 4 to midnight shift at a mental health and chemical dependency insurance company. I wasn't a triage nurse, but I was the person they would call after hours if they had a mental health or chemical dependency emergency, and I would get them to the proper place. Either I'd route them to our nurse on hand or on call, or basically get them to the facility that needed to be. So before I would go to work at 4 p.m., I would stop by my church, drop off my tithes. I'd actually go to the ATM and pull the cash out because I didn't want to have to figure out when they were going to clear my check. So I went to the ATM, got the cash out. This was back in the 90s, before PayPal, Venmo, Cash App, before all of that. So I went, got my cash, and I would take it to the church. Every time I got paid, I would pay my tithes first and then go to work. And in paying my tithes, I didn't realize the spiritual insight that I was gaining from just being faithful in paying my tithes when I had my job. I didn't realize the spiritual maturity I was gaining. There was spiritual and words are slipping me now, but there were so many things that I was gaining spiritually because I was faithful in paying my tithes. And there were things that were being opened up to me that I didn't even have a clue about because I was paying my tithes. So I'm just going through my notes so I don't miss anything. And there was also a spiritual awareness that I didn't know that would come with paying my tithes. And as I'm dealing with all these things spiritual, the one thing I'm speaking to God about is I need you to speak to me audibly. I need you to speak to me audibly so I can hear what you have to say so I won't miss it. I don't want to miss anything. And when you're new to the Word of God, or even when you're new to God speaking to you, there are things that you're going to miss. And the thing is you want to make sure you get them the next time. So as God is starting to reveal hidden truths to me, the one about meat was revealed. Whereas I heard last week a racist say in the spirit that they know culturally black people do not have a spiritual ear because we are too easy to kill. Thus, all the names behind the hashtags, because we don't have a spiritual ear. We won't stop eating meat for 3 months. We can go back to it afterward. I definitely recommend you do, because if you don't, it makes you angry. But we won't stop eating meat for 3 months to save our lives. Some folks, it don't take 3 months. Some folks, it takes 2 months. But we won't stop eating meat to save our lives. We can't expect other people to do for us what we should be able to do for ourselves. We at this point, because we are led as lamb to the slaughter all day long, we have to be responsible for ourselves. And I understand that's the reason why I've had so many issues over this past year, is because I'm going to be the one to say what we need to do as black people so we can stop putting a hashtag and then our name behind the hashtag. And every time we say no more hashtags, we're intent on expecting somebody else to do something for us when we in fact have to do things for ourselves. So it has been with spiritual ears, spiritual intuition, and the love I have for people that I've been able to feel their pain. And this is why the interviews don't work for me, because the part I'm going into now isn't interview worthy, because it doesn't edify anybody. It tells the horrible truth of what we're actually dealing with. Because I love people, I've felt the rape of people that were close to me. I felt them give up hope. I felt their confusion when they recognized who they were betrayed by. And I felt their death. And then certain ones, after their death, I heard in the spirit them say, "Eat up." That's when it was revealed to me that racists believe that darker skinned people have the power in them to heal them from whatever it is that they're dealing with, and they believe if they eat them that they can attain their power. Yeah. If they eat the darker skinned black people, they believe those people have power. And if they eat their intestines after they die, they believe they can attain that power. And the way you involve other black people in this part of it is you introduce them to a rape fetish where they're willing to assist in raping people because they're unaware of the other things that go on behind the screens. Now, also, every nationality took part in the rape, okay? Asians, Mexicans, blacks, and whites. Everybody took part in the rapes. Nobody's guilty. That's why when I'm looking around and I see somebody smoking meth or smoking crank, whether they're white, whether they're Latino, whether they're Asian, they're all part of Loretta's crew to keep this rape fetish going. The only difference is that it's her crew and Simi that are eating the dark-skinned black people. And that's why earlier this year in March, when I was emailing Bishop, I told him to take the debt ratio of Simi Valley extremely high, because I knew that's what was happening, and that's what bothered me beyond what I could have ever imagined. I'm sorry, I'm putting my other phone on Do Not Disturb. So, if all nationalities participate in the rape, that's how you commit themselves to being loyal to this rape fetish. But all nationalities are not participating in the eating, in the cannibalism of eating of dark-skinned people. And the reason, actually, let me change that. The other thing I've learned is that people die from secondhand smoke of meth and crank, depending on the size of the person and when the last time was they ate. They either die in hours or within days. Usually it's within hours because they haven't eaten. That's the severity of the reason why the smoking of the crank or the meth has been surrounded us, because it was an attempt for us to die. Which is also the reason why I was so upset about my daughter having to go to the doctor that Monday, because my focus was when I got to church, I just need to talk to Bishop. I need him to say a prayer for me. I need to cover my daughter because I went through chemotherapy for breast cancer. My mother passed away from colon cancer, misdiagnosed for 5 years. I remember the pain I went through with chemotherapy, and the thought of that, knowing that my family is prone to cancer, the thought of going through that with my daughter was the reason that I went to church. That's what motivated me to go to church. But then I'm at church, and the feeling that is usually there was different. And the difference was as I'm sitting down, I'm looking at dark-skinned people walk by. Beautiful lady and her daughter and family sat down the aisle from me, and I just noticed how beautiful they were. And then I saw another dark-skinned lady go by, and I'm like, why am I noticing all these dark-skinned people? Because I don't